Welcome back to the channel, friends. Before we dive into today's story, a tale of a mother's awakening and a daughter's cold betrayal, I have a small favor to ask. If you believe in standing up for yourself, please press that like button and subscribe. It helps these voices be heard. Also, let me know in the comments, have you ever felt taken for granted by family? I read every single one. Now, let's step into the hallway of an old brownstone where the air was about to change forever. 3 hours had passed since the front door rattled in its frame, slamming shut on my daughter's exit. Yet, the cloying, sugary sweetness of Quintessa's perfume still haunted the hallway. It was a scent that didn't belong here. It was too loud, too modern for a house that breathed the dust of the last century and the faint, dry aroma of lavender sachets. I stood paralyzed in the center of the kitchen, my gaze fixed on the pantry door. The silence in the apartment was absolute. In the past, I cherished this quiet. It was my reward after 12 hours bent over a sewing machine, my eyes burning from threading needles and my spine curved like a question mark. But today the silence wasn't peaceful. It felt predatory. It was watching me. My stomach gave a violent, painful twist. It is a humiliation to admit, but I was starving. It wasn't a metaphorical hunger for love or attention. It was the raw, primal gnawing of an empty belly as evening approached. I forced my legs to move toward the cupboard. The hinges groaned, a sound like an old woman's joints, complaining about the disruption. I peered inside. The shelves were pristine, wiped clean, and devastatingly empty. Quintessa had been in a whirlwind before she left. She had torn through the apartment like a tropical storm, tossing bikinis, silk wraps, and expensive tanning oils into her luggage. I remembered the moment at the door. She was already in her heels, hand extended, palm open. "Mama, give me the card. Just for emergencies. You know how unreliable the ATMs are on the island." "But Quintessa," I had whispered, a cold dread pooling in my gut. "That is the entire pension check. What will I eat for 2 weeks?" She had rolled her eyes, a gesture she had perfected in her teenage years. She snatched the plastic from my trembling fingers. "Stop the drama. There's a full jar of grits in the pantry. Boil them with water and a pinch of salt. It's a detox. At your age, you shouldn't be eating heavy foods anyway. I deserve this break, Mama." And with that, she was gone. Off to Miami. Off to sunsets and cocktails with paper umbrellas, taking my peace, my money, and as I was now discovering my sustenance. Grits. She said there were grits. I reached for the high shelf, grabbing the glass jar labeled in my own handwriting from decades ago. It felt terrifyingly light. I unscrewed the lid and peered into the abyss of the jar. At the bottom, nestled in gray dust, were maybe a dozen grains. It wasn't enough to feed a mouse, let alone a human woman. She had lied. Or worse, she hadn't even looked. She condemned me to starvation without a second thought, discarding me the moment her Uber arrived. But as I stood there, shivering from an internal chill, I remembered something else. Quintessa was messy. She often left things behind in her pockets. Hook. I rushed to her room hoping to find a few forgotten coins to buy bread. But instead of loose change, I found a crumpled piece of paper that would change everything. A document that revealed exactly how much my suffering was worth to her. I entered Quintessa's room, and the chaos hit me instantly. It was a stark contrast to the rest of the house. Clothes were draped over chairs like shed skins, open lipstick tubes smeared the vanity, and discarded receipts littered the floor like fallen leaves. I began a methodical search, lifting stacks of fashion magazines and shaking out jeans pockets. Nothing. The jewelry dish was empty. The pockets were turned out. Just as I was about to give up, a ball of paper near the trash can caught my eye. She had thrown it, missed the rim, and couldn't be bothered to pick it up. I uncrumpled the sheet, smoothing it out on her desk. It was her travel itinerary, the hotel reservation, and the flight details. The numbers danced before my failing eyes, but the total at the bottom was bold and black. I gasped. The amount my daughter had spent for 14 days of laying on a beach was exactly equal to 3 months of my Social Security benefits. 3 months. I stood in the twilight of her room, feeling the walls shrinking. For years I had darned stockings until they were more thread than nylon. I had turned my winter coat inside out to reline it because I couldn't afford a new one. I had skipped meals to buy her the trendy shoes, the college textbooks, the graduation dress. "Mama, this is the style," she would say, and I would pay. I walked out of her room and shut the door firmly, sealing off the scent of her selfishness. The living room awaited me. It was dimly lit by the street lamps outside, casting long shadows over my tormentors. The furniture. There stood the massive oak buffet, carved with gargoyles and vines, heavy as a tombstone. Inside, behind locked glass, gleamed the Haviland Limoges porcelain, a service for 12. We had eaten off it twice in 40 years. For Quintessa's wedding, I always said, the wedding never came, but the china waited. Beside it lay the silver tea service, my grandmother's legacy. In the closet hung fur coats smelling of mothballs, coats Quintessa called dust traps, but which were worth thousands. I looked around the room and realized the truth. This wasn't a home. It was the Quintessa Johnson Museum, and I wasn't the owner. I was the unpaid janitor. I was the curator shuffling around in worn slippers, dusting the exhibits, starving to death so that one day a visitor could arrive, claim everything, and not even say thank you. My stomach growled again, louder this time. But the sound didn't bring shame anymore. It brought clarity. Cold, crystalline clarity. I marched to the coffee table, where a stack of newspapers lay another thing Quintessa hated. Hoarding, she called it. I flipped through the pages until I found the classifieds. I had circled an ad a week ago, purely out of habit. Mr. Alistair Sterling, buyer of antiques, porcelain, silver, and rarities. Honest appraisals. House calls. I looked at the rotary phone. "Grits," I whispered to the empty room. "You said I have grits." "Hook." I picked up the receiver and dialed. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. When the man answered, I didn't ask for charity. I asked for a business meeting. And what I was about to sell was the one thing Quintessa had been waiting her whole life to inherit. "Good evening," I said, my voice surprising me with its steadiness. "Is this Mr. Sterling? My name is Yuli. I understand you buy sterling silver flatware." "I do," the raspy, polite voice replied. "What period?" I glanced at the velvet box on the sideboard. Early 20th century, Gorham, Chantilly pattern. Mr. Sterling was a man of his word. At 9 a.m. sharp the next morning, the doorbell sliced through the silence. I hadn't slept. I had sat in the armchair opposite the buffet like a guard dog, watching the treasures I was about to surrender. But they weren't treasures anymore. They were currency. I opened the door to a man in a gray overcoat and wire-rimmed glasses. He looked like a university professor, but his eyes were sharp. They were eyes that appraised the world in dollar signs. "Mrs. Yuli?" he asked. "You have quite the home." "It's not a home," I corrected him, stepping aside. "It's a storage unit. Come in." I led him to the dining room and unlatched the heavy wooden case. The interior was lined with dark green velvet, and resting there were 12 silver spoons, heavy and cold. They were engraved with vines and my great-grandparents' initials. Quintessa used to run her fingers over them. "When I get married, Mama, we'll eat cake with these." Mr. Sterling put on white cotton gloves. He took out a jeweler's loop and inspected a spoon. The silence stretched, broken only by the ticking of the grandfather clock. "Marvelous condition," he murmured. "Never used?" "Admired," I said. "Never used." He straightened up. "I can offer you." He named a price. It was significant. It was 5 times my monthly pension check. A month ago, I would have fainted. I would have taken it and hidden it under a mattress. But the hunger in my belly had awakened a dormant beast, the negotiator. I had spent years haggling at fabric markets for pennies. I knew how this dance worked. "No," I said firmly. Sterling blinked. "Excuse me?" "This is a complete set, Mr. Sterling. Original casing. No scratches. You will sell this to a collector for triple that amount." "I am not asking for retail, but I want a fair dealer's price." I named a figure 40% higher than his offer. He looked at me, really looked at me, for the first time. He saw the worn robe, but he also saw the steel in my spine. He chuckled. "You are not as simple as you seem, Mrs. Yuli. Deal." 10 minutes later, he was gone with the case. I stood in the hallway clutching a thick envelope of cash. My heart pounded with a rhythm I hadn't felt in years. Adrenaline. I didn't stash the money away. I put on my beige cashmere coat saved for funerals and weddings and walked out the door. I didn't go to the discount store. I walked downtown to the Epicurean market. The automatic doors parted, and I was hit with the scent of roasting coffee, truffle oil, and fresh bread. I walked past the produce aisle like a queen. I bought prosciutto, aged Parmesan, olives stuffed with almonds, and a warm, crusty baguette. And then I saw them. Peaches. Imported, out of season, fuzzy and golden like small suns. They cost a fortune. 2, I told the clerk, the biggest ones. Hook. I returned home and set the table with the fine lace cloth Quintessa forbade me to use. I ate like royalty, savoring every bite. But as I finished the last slice of peach, wiping the juice from my chin, the phone rang. It was a harsh, demanding ring. I knew exactly who it was, and for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid to answer. And then I saw them. Peaches, imported, out of season, fuzzy and golden like small suns. They cost a fortune. 2, I told the clerk, the biggest ones. Hook. I returned home and set the table with the fine lace cloth Quintessa forbade me to use. I ate like royalty, savoring every bite. But as I finished the last slice of peach, wiping the juice from my chin, the phone rang. It was a harsh, demanding ring. I knew exactly who it was, and for the first time in my life I wasn't afraid to answer. How much? I asked. The price he named was double the spoons. It was enough to live on for 6 months, or enough to have the best 2 weeks of my life. It's yours, I said. This piece has history, Sterling noted as he packed it away. The history is over, I replied. Now it is just stone and metal. When he left, I looked at the empty spot in the jewelry box. I felt no regret, only a thrill of power. I ordered lunch from a French bistro, veal medallions and a crab salad. But as I looked for a place to file the receipt, rummaging through the chaotic drawer of the secretary desk where Quintessa shoved her paperwork, my hand brushed against a thick, plastic folder hidden under old magazines. It was bright red. I pulled it out. Hook. Inside was a brochure for Restful Meadows State Facility for Seniors, and clipped to it was a legal document. As I read the fine print, my blood didn't just run cold, it froze solid. This wasn't just selfishness, this was a conspiracy. My hands shook as I held the glossy brochure. Restful Meadows. The name sounded peaceful, but everyone in the neighborhood knew the truth. It was a warehouse for the forgotten. It smelled of boiled cabbage and industrial bleach. It was where you went to stare at a ceiling until you expired. Behind the brochure was a draft of a power of attorney document. It was filled out with my name, granting Quintessa Johnson full control over my assets, my medical decisions, and my real estate. There was a date penciled in the margin, next month. The world tilted on its axis. She wasn't just waiting for me to die naturally so she could inherit the apartment and the antiques. She was impatient. She was planning to check me into a state facility, sell my home, and live off the proceeds while I rotted in a ward. She smiled at me, took my pension check, flew to Miami, and all the while she had the paperwork ready to evict me from my own life. I didn't cry. Tears are for sadness. This was pure, white-hot fury. I threw the folder onto the desk. If she wanted an inheritance, she would have one, but it wouldn't be what she expected. I grabbed the phone. Mr. Sterling, it's Yuli. Turn the car around and bring a truck. A truck? Alistair asked, confused. Did you find another box? I am clearing it out. I said, my voice hard as diamond. Everything. The painting, the grandfather clock, the Persian rug, the rest of the porcelain. If it has value, I want it gone. Today. The next 3 hours were a blur of activity. 2 sturdy movers came in and began dismantling my life. The landscape painting was lifted from the wall, leaving a pale, ghostly rectangle on the wallpaper. The grandfather clock, whose ticking had measured my heartbeat for 50 years, was wrapped in bubble wrap and silenced. The Persian rug was rolled up and carried away. I stood in the center of the room, watching the museum being dismantled. With every item that left, my chest felt lighter. The oppressive weight of history was being carried out the door. The apartment was becoming spacious, airy, and most importantly, mine. Alistair wrote checks and counted out stacks of cash. The pile on the table grew obscene. "Mrs. Uli, are you sure?" he asked gently as the last box was taped shut. "You won't regret this?" "I regret only that I didn't do it 10 years ago," I replied. When the door closed behind them, I was left with an empty apartment and a bag full of money. I called a cleaning service immediately. I want a deep clean. Windows, walls, floors. I want the smell of the past scrubbed out. While the cleaners worked, scrubbing away the dust of ages, I went online to an elite gourmet importer. I didn't look at prices. I looked at desires. Beluga caviar, add to cart. White truffles, add to cart. Vintage champagne, Dom Perignon, add to cart. Foie gras, imported cheeses, exotic fruits. I selected same-day delivery. Hook. The delivery men arrived just as the cleaners were leaving. They carried thermal boxes that looked like they held human organs, but they held something far more vital, my revenge. We opened the old, humming refrigerator, and I gave the order. Fill it up. Every inch. The delivery men exchanged baffled glances, but they followed orders. We stood before the old Kelvinator fridge, which hummed loudly in the corner of the kitchen. It was the only old thing left, a stark white beast in a now spotless room. "Load it," I commanded. They began to unpack. On the top shelf, where usually a lonely carton of milk and a withered apple sat, they stacked blue tin jars of beluga caviar. Row after row of them, shimmering under the refrigerator light. Next to them went the blocks of golden artisanal butter and glass jars of truffles. The middle shelf was dedicated to meats and cheeses. Prosciutto di Parma, Wagyu beef strips, wheels of soft brie, and sharp Roquefort. The vegetable crisper, usually home to a rotting cabbage, was filled with dragon fruit, mangosteens, and yellow mangoes, a riot of tropical color. The wine rack was filled with bottles of vintage champagne, their gold foil necks catching the light. "Anything else, ma'am?" the courier asked, wiping sweat from his forehead. The fridge was groaning. "Squeeze the Belgian chocolates onto the door," I said, "right where the ketchup used to be." When they finished, I tipped them generously and closed the door. The latch clicked shut. It sounded like the closing of a bank vault. I stood back and admired the room. The apartment was transformed. Without the heavy oak furniture and the dusty rugs, the setting sun flooded the floors with golden light. I had bought a huge bouquet of white lilies and placed them in a crystal vase on the floor. The air smelled of expensive flowers and lemon polish, not mothballs and medicine. I went to the bathroom and showered, washing my hair with expensive salon shampoo. I put on a new robe I had bought, emerald green silk that felt like water against my skin. I did my hair. I put on a touch of lipstick. And then I waited. The 2 weeks were up. At exactly noon the next day, a key scratched in the lock. I was sitting at the small kitchen table, the only table left, sipping Darjeeling tea from a bone china cup. The front door swung open with a bang, hitting the wall. The noise of the city and the smell of exhaust fumes rushed in. "Mama, I'm home!" Quintessa's voice boomed. "I hope you've humbled yourself enough to apologize. I'm exhausted and I don't want to hear any whining about your hunger." The sound of suitcase wheels dragging across the parquet floor followed. She stomped in, expecting the semi-darkness. She expected the smell of despair. She expected her victim. Instead, she stopped dead in the hallway. "What is that smell?" she sniffed loudly. "Did you spill perfume?" She took 2 steps and froze. The echo of her heels was too loud. She looked around, her eyes widening. "Wait," she said, her voice dropping. "Why is it so big in here?" "Hook." She walked slowly toward the kitchen, confusion clouding her face. She hadn't realized the truth yet. She just felt the wrongness of it. She dropped her bag and marched toward me. "I bet you didn't cook anything. I'm starving. I'm going to make a sandwich." Her hand reached for the refrigerator handle. Quintessa didn't even look at me. She was led by her stomach and her habit of dominating the space. She wore a bright floral sundress that clashed violently with the serene, empty cleanliness of the kitchen. Her nose was peeling from sunburn, and she radiated an aura of irritation. "I swear, if the milk is sour, I'm going to scream, she muttered, reaching for the fridge. Open it, I said softly, taking a sip of tea. She yanked the door open with force, ready to criticize whatever meager contents she found. The light flared on, and Quintessa screamed. It wasn't a scream of pain. It was a yelp of pure, unadulterated shock. She recoiled physically, stumbling back as if a wild animal had lunged at her from the crisper drawer. Before her, packed tight from floor to ceiling, was a king's ransom in food. The blue tins of caviar stared back at her. The gold foil of the Dom Perignon mocked her. The truffles, the exotic fruits, the imported chocolates, it was an explosion of wealth in a box that used to hold leftovers. "What?" she squeaked, her voice cracked. "What is this?" She reached out a trembling hand and touched a cold jar of caviar, as if checking to see if it was a hologram. It was solid. It was real. She spun around to face me. "Mama, where did this come from? Did you steal a credit card? Did you take out a loan? Are you insane? Do you know the interest rates?" She darted her eyes around the kitchen, and finally, the reality of the room caught up with her. She looked past me into the living room. She saw the pale squares on the wallpaper. She saw the empty corner where the clock used to be. She saw the bare floor. "The jewelry box!" she shrieked. She ran into the living room and then sprinted back, holding the empty velvet case for the spoons. "The silver! The spoons!" She was gasping for air, her face draining of color. "The ruby brooch! The rug! Mama, we've been robbed!" "Oh my God! You left the door open, didn't you? While I was gone, someone came in and cleaned us out." She grabbed her phone, her fingers fumbling to unlock it. "I have to call the police. This is a disaster. That stuff was worth millions." "No police, Quintessa," I said. My voice was calm, cutting through her hysteria like a knife through butter. She froze. "What do you mean? They took everything!" "Nobody stole anything," I said, setting my cup down with a deliberate clink. "I sold it." The phone slipped from her hand and hit the floor with a thud. "Sold it?" she whispered. The concept seemed alien to her. To whom? Why? I stood up and walked to the table, picking up a jar of caviar. "I told you, Quintessa, I was hungry. You took my check. You left me with empty jars. A person has to eat." I smiled, a cold, tight smile. "So I decided to have your brooch for breakfast, on toast. It was delicious. And yesterday? Yesterday I drank grandfather's clock. Mahogany has a wonderful aftertaste, especially when it's a 2015 vintage." Hook. The realization hit her. Her face twisted from shock to a grotesque mask of greed. She looked at the jar in my hand not as food, but as her stolen future. She lunged toward the fridge. "I'll save what's left. I can return this. I won't let you eat my inheritance. Give it back." Quintessa screamed, grabbing 2 jars of caviar and clutching a bottle of champagne to her chest. "I'll take it back to the store. Do you have the receipt?" I watched her, this grown woman acting like a spoiled child, trying to hoard groceries to salvage her financial dreams. "Put it back," I commanded. I slammed my hand on the table. Bam! Quintessa flinched. She had never heard me make such a noise. She was used to the mouse, not the lion. "That is my dinner," I said, enunciating every syllable. "And you have no money. Remember? You spent it all on the beach. You came back to a mother with no pension check. You wanted me to starve? Fine. Now we starve together. Only I will be eating caviar, and you will watch." "You're crazy," she hissed, tears of rage welling in her eyes. "You are senile. A normal person doesn't sell antiques to buy fish eggs. This is dementia." She shoved the jars back onto the shelf with a clatter, not out of obedience, but out of a sudden dawning strategy. She straightened up, wiping her hands. "I am calling a doctor," she announced, picking her phone up from the floor. "Right now, you are dangerous to yourself. You are having a psychotic episode. I will have you committed, and the sales will be annulled. I'll get the furniture back." She dialed 911. "Yes, I need an ambulance and psychiatric assistance. My mother is having a breakdown. She's destroying property. It's an emergency." I sat back down and spread some truffles onto a cracker. "Go ahead," I said, taking a bite. "Make the call." For 20 minutes, Quintessa paced the hallway like a caged tiger. She peered out the window, muttering to herself, "They'll see. They'll fix this. I'll get power of attorney today." Finally, the doorbell rang. "Thank God!" Quintessa rushed to the door. "Come in, quickly! She's in the kitchen! She's totally incoherent!" But when she threw the door open, it wasn't paramedics in white coats. It was Miss Theodosia, our upstairs neighbor, wearing her floral housecoat. And standing behind her, looking solemn and distinguished, was Alistair Sterling. "Quintessa?" Miss Theodosia blinked. "What is all the screaming? I thought there was a fire." And this gentleman was ringing the bell just as I came down. "You!" Quintessa grabbed the neighbor's arm. "You're a witness. Mama has lost her mind. She sold everything. The silver, the paintings. She bought luxury food with it. It's madness. You have to tell the doctors she's incompetent." She dragged them into the kitchen. "Look at her." I sat there in my silk robe, calm and composed. "Hello, Theodosia. Hello, Alistair. Would you like some tea? And perhaps a sandwich with beluga caviar?" Theodosia's eyes popped out of her head. "Real caviar?" "She doesn't understand," Quintessa shrieked. "Mr. Sterling, you are a scammer. You took advantage of a senile old woman. I will sue you. I will have these transactions reversed." Mr. Sterling calmly set his briefcase on the only remaining chair. He adjusted his glasses. "Incompetent?" he asked softly. "I beg to differ." "Hook." He opened his briefcase and pulled out a thick stack of documents. "I have been in this business for 40 years, young lady, and I have never met a negotiator as sharp as your mother. Furthermore," he tapped a paper with a blue stamp, "we anticipated your reaction." "Here are the bills of sale," Alistair said, laying them out on the table, "signed by Mrs. Yulee. And attached to each is a certificate from a notary public attesting that the seller is of sound mind and memory. We arranged this specifically because your mother predicted this exact tantrum." Quintessa snatched the papers, her eyes scanning the lines frantically. It was watertight, legal, final. "But she's eating the money!" Quintessa cried, pointing at my toast. "That's not normal behavior." "And what is normal, Quintessa?" Miss Theodosia piped up. She had already sat down and was happily munching on a $50 sandwich I had pushed toward her. "Yulee wore the same coat for 10 years to save money for you. Did you ever buy her a chocolate bar? Now she sells her own things to eat like a queen and suddenly she's crazy? You don't understand." Quintessa was hyperventilating. "Her inheritance was gone. That was my future. She didn't have the right." "It is her property," Alistair said coldly. "She has every right." Silence fell over the kitchen. Quintessa stood there, red-faced, sweaty, and defeated. She looked at the three of us, the united front. "Fine," she spat, narrowing her eyes. "You won this round. You ate everything. Good for you. But guess what? We still have to live here. And when you run out of your precious caviar, who is going to take care of you? Me. And I won't forget this. I will make your life a living hell. You'll regret not dying of hunger." She turned to storm out, planning to slam the door and start her campaign of misery. "Stop," I said. I opened the drawer of the table. "You are so worried about my future, Quintessa, about who will take care of me." I pulled out the red folder. Quintessa went pale. All the blood drained from her face as if a plug had been pulled. She recognized it instantly. "Where did you get that?" she whispered. "I was looking for loose change," I said. "You told me to look for change. I found this instead." I tossed the brochure for Restful Meadows onto the table. It slid across the surface and stopped right in front of her. "You plan to check me in next month," I stated. "You were going to sell the brownstone, take the cash, and dump me in a state ward." Miss Theodosia gasped, covering her mouth. Alistair looked at Quintessa with pure disgust. "Mama, it's not what you think," Quintessa stammered, backing away. "It's just a backup plan, in case you got sick." "Shut up," I said. I stood up and walked toward her. "I know what a power of attorney is. You wanted my home? Well, here is the news." I shoved the brochure into her limp hand. "Keep this. You might need it when you get old, because you don't live here anymore." "What?" She blinked. "You can't kick me out. I'm registered here." "It is my apartment," I said. And I changed the locks this morning. Your key is useless. And your suitcase? I pointed to the hall. You never unpacked. It's ready to go. Hook, I'll call the police, she screamed. I have rights. Call them. I shrugged. But while they figure it out, you have nowhere to sleep. And if you try to break in, Mr. Sterling and Theodosia are witnesses that you threatened my life. I looked at my neighbor. Right? Theodosia nodded vigorously, swallowing a mouthful of expensive cheese. I heard her say she'd make your life hell. I'll tell the officer. Quintessa looked at the wall of people standing against her. She looked at the empty apartment she had hoped to sell. She looked at the fridge full of food she couldn't eat. She realized, finally, that she had lost. She grabbed her suitcase handle. Damn you all, she shrieked. I hope you choke on your caviar. I hope you die alone. She fled the apartment. The door slammed shut, vibrating the walls. Silence returned, but this time, it wasn't heavy. It was light. I should go, Mr. Sterling said gently, picking up his briefcase. I'll come for the books tomorrow if you like. You need to rest. Thank you, Alistair, I said. Tomorrow. When they left, I locked the deadbolt. Click, click. The sound was sweeter than music. 2 weeks have passed since that day. The air in the apartment has changed completely. It smells of autumn and freedom. I stepped out onto the balcony this morning, wrapping a new terracotta wool shawl around my shoulders. I bought it with the money from an old moth-eaten fur coat I finally sold. It's funny I saved that coat for 20 years, and in the end it just bought me a shawl. But this shawl keeps me warm, not the ghosts in the closet. Quintessa tried to call a few times. She threatened, she cried, she banged on the door. I told her through the wood. One more disturbance, and I sell the apartment, move to a studio by the beach, and donate the rest to a cat shelter. She stopped coming. The apartment is her last hope for an inheritance, so she is waiting, terrified I will spend that too. Let her wait. She is renting a room somewhere, learning what it costs to buy her own milk. I sat in my wicker chair on the balcony. On my lap was a plate with a croissant, butter, and a thick slice of smoked salmon. Next to it, a travel brochure for a spa resort in the mountains. A month-long stay. I can afford it now. I took a bite of the sandwich. The salty fish mixed with the sweet butter. I closed my eyes and chewed slowly. The taste was familiar. It tasted like the diamond earrings my late husband gave me for my 30th birthday. They were heavy and pinched my ears. I hated wearing them. Now I was eating them, and they were delicious. I took a sip of coffee. It was bitter and hot, like the tears I never shed. I smiled at the sun. This was the taste of freedom, the taste of knowing I owe nothing to anyone. My life belongs to me, down to the last penny, down to the last crumb. And that, dear listeners, is my story. A story of how the cup of patience finally overflowed. What do you think? Did Yuli go too far? In our society, we are told parents must give everything to their children, even their own dignity. But where is the line? Quintessa planned the ultimate betrayal. Did she deserve to be cast out? Or was eating the inheritance too cruel? I am dying to hear your thoughts in the comments. Do we often turn our lives into museums for others, waiting for a thank you that never comes? If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button and share it with a friend who might need to hear this. You matter. You are not a resource to be used. Subscribe for more stories of strength and justice. Until next time, take care of yourselves.